On 163, missing children found in Florida led operation, and investigators say more arrests could follow. For 5 days in August, law enforcement teams in Florida were looking for children who had disappeared. But this was not a search confined to one city, or even one state. Investigators followed cases across the United States and far beyond its borders. When the operation ended, officials said 163 missing children had been located or recovered. The youngest was just 2 months old. The oldest was 17. Some were found in Florida. Others were located in states including Ohio, California, and New York. And some were found thousands of miles away, in countries ranging from Mexico and Brazil to Italy, Ghana, and Taiwan. Florida officials are calling it the largest child recovery operation of its kind in state history. But the number 163 tells only part of the story, because these children were not all missing for the same reason. Some had run away. Some had reportedly been abandoned or neglected. Some were believed to have suffered abuse, and officials say some had been caught in human trafficking situations. 3 men have already been arrested in connection with cases uncovered during the operation, and authorities say many more investigations have now begun. More arrests could follow. So how did a 5-day Florida operation end up reaching across 5 continents? Why were so many agencies involved? And what happens to a missing child after law enforcement finally finds them? This is what we know about Operation Statewide Shield. Florida builds a statewide search. The operation was known as Operation Statewide Shield. According to Florida Attorney General James Uthmeyer's office, law enforcement teams spent 5 days in mid-August focusing on missing children whose cases were connected to Florida. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement, or FDLE, helped steer the operation, but this was much larger than one agency. Florida's Office of Statewide Prosecution participated. So did the Department of Children and Families. The Department of Juvenile Justice was involved. Medical providers, victim advocates, and organizations working with trafficking survivors also participated. 13 Florida sheriff's offices provided support, along with municipal police departments, federal agencies, and foreign law enforcement partners. That last part became particularly important because investigators did not simply find children inside Florida. They followed the cases wherever the evidence led. Children were located in Florida, Alabama, California, Ohio, New York, North Carolina, Puerto Rico, and Tennessee. Others were located in Brazil, Canada, Colombia, Dominica, Finland, Ghana, Guatemala, Italy, Jamaica, Mexico, Spain, and Taiwan. In other words, a Florida-led operation ultimately involved children located across 5 continents. And that raises an obvious question. How does a missing child investigation in Florida end up on the other side of the world? The answer is that a missing person case does not stop at a state line. Families move. Children travel. Custody disputes can cross jurisdictions. People communicate through phones and social media. And in some cases, investigators may discover that someone originally reported missing has left the country. When that happens, local police cannot work alone. They need other departments, federal authorities, and sometimes foreign governments. Operation Statewide Shield was designed around that reality. As not 163 identical cases, there is another important distinction. It would be inaccurate to say that all 163 children were kidnapped or that all 163 were rescued from traffickers. Officials have not said that. The circumstances varied significantly. Some of the children were classified as runaways. Others had reportedly been abandoned or neglected. Some were believed to have been abused. And some had allegedly become victims of human trafficking. Those categories matter, because when most people hear the words missing child, they may picture a stranger kidnapping. But law enforcement's work with endangered missing children is often much more complicated. A teenager who repeatedly runs away from an unsafe home can still face serious danger. A child caught in a custody dispute may be hundreds or thousands of miles from the guardian legally responsible for them. A runaway may be staying with adults who take advantage of that child's vulnerability. Others may be living around drugs, violence, or criminal activity. That is why finding the child is only the first part of the mission. Investigators then have to answer another question. Is it actually safe to send that child home? For some of the children located during Statewide Shield, officials said the answer was yes. They were reunited with family. For others, the situation was different. Some were placed in foster care, and officials say children brought into recovery hubs had access to social workers, child welfare professionals, healthcare providers, victim advocates, and other services. That part of the operation may be just as important as the search itself, because locating a child does not automatically remove the conditions that caused that child to disappear in the first place. The playbook came from earlier operations. Operation Statewide Shield did not appear out of nowhere. Florida law enforcement says it incorporated lessons from earlier operations led by the U.S. Marshals Service. One of them was Operation Dragon Eye. In June 2025, the U.S. Marshals Service and partner agencies conducted a 2-week effort across Hillsborough, Pinellas, and Pasco counties. 60 critically missing children were recovered or safely located. 8 arrests were made. But one feature of Dragon Eye was especially important. The operation did not concentrate only on finding children. Teams also prepared medical care, food, social services, child advocates, and appropriate placement for the young people they located. Investigators knew before the searches began that many of the children would need immediate help once they were found. Then came another major effort, Operation Home for the Holidays. That operation took place later in 2025. It resulted in 122 missing or endangered children being recovered or safely located. Those cases stretched across several Florida metropolitan areas and beyond the state. Again, child welfare was built into the operation from the beginning. Medical services, juvenile justice coordination, foster care, advocacy, placement. Law enforcement was not treating recovery as the final step. It was treating recovery as the moment when the next phase began. Operation Statewide Shield appears to have taken that model and expanded it. Instead of concentrating primarily on one part of Florida, this became a statewide initiative. And according to Florida officials, it became the largest operation of its kind in the state's history. And 3 arrests so far. The operation also produced criminal investigations. As of the initial announcement, officials said 3 men had been arrested in connection with cases uncovered through the effort. The first is Michael Corey Prescott. According to the Florida Attorney General's office, Prescott was arrested by the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office on August 21st. Authorities said he already had an active warrant connected to interference with child custody. He now faces additional felony charges involving alleged misconduct toward a minor, as well as battery and aggravated assault allegations. The second man is Robert Farrell Allison. He was arrested by the Lee County Sheriff's Office on August 20th and faces a felony charge involving alleged sexual misconduct with a minor. The third is Jaden Allen Harwood. Authorities say Harwood was arrested on charges related to interference in a child custody matter and resisting officers without violence. All charges remain allegations unless and until proven in court. And the 3 arrests should not be interpreted as meaning there were exactly 3 criminal situations among the 163 recoveries. Investigators are still working through information uncovered during the operation. A spokesperson for Attorney General Utmeyer's office said many additional investigations had been started, and officials expect more arrests. That may become one of the most important parts of this story in the coming weeks. Because when a missing child is located, investigators can obtain information they did not have before. Who was the child staying with? How did they get there? Who had been communicating with them? Did another adult help move or conceal them? Was a crime committed? Are other children potentially at risk? One recovery can create an entirely new investigation, and sometimes that investigation can lead authorities to people or locations that were never part of the original missing person case. Why the first hours after recovery matter? For a child who has been missing, the moment of recovery can be complicated. Law enforcement needs information, but the child may also need food, medical attention, a safe place to stay, someone trained to speak with them, and sometimes protection from the very environment they came from. That is why Statewide Shield used what officials described as support hubs. Children could be brought to locations where multiple services were available. Instead of simply locating a child and then trying to determine what to do next, agencies had resources positioned to respond immediately. That can also help investigators. A child who feels safe may eventually provide information that helps authorities understand what happened while they were missing. But officials must balance that need with the child's welfare. The goal is not simply to close a file. It is to reduce the chance that the same child disappears again. The U.S. Marshals Service used a similar approach during earlier Florida operations. Their definition of a critically missing child focuses heavily on risk. That can include exposure to violence, exploitation, substance abuse, crime, or domestic instability. So even when a missing child left voluntarily, law enforcement may still consider that child endangered. That distinction is important. Running away does not mean being safe. Yay. A 5-day operation that required months of experience. At first glance, 5 days may sound surprisingly short for an operation that located 163 children. But the 5-day enforcement period does not mean investigators started from zero on day one. Missing child operations depend heavily on information already gathered. Open cases, police reports, warrants, family interviews, phone numbers, known associates, addresses, social media activity, tips, information from schools, child welfare agencies, and other jurisdictions. Then investigators attempt to turn that scattered information into a location. In some cases, that location may be a house only a few miles away. In another, it might be another state. In another, a foreign country. That is where coordination becomes critical. One Florida investigator cannot simply travel overseas and take custody of a child. Authorities have to work through the agencies that have jurisdiction where the child is located. Statewide Shield demonstrates what can happen when all those pieces are organized around a single mission. The operation connected state prosecutors, FDLE agents, sheriff's offices, federal partners, social service agencies, healthcare workers, and international law enforcement. The result was 163 missing child cases, reaching a major turning point within one concentrated operation. Now, the number does not mean the story is over. The headline is understandably dramatic. 163 children found. 5 continents. The largest statewide operation of its kind in Florida history. But from an investigative perspective, the most important number may not be 163. It may be 3. 3 arrests so far, because authorities have already warned that number could grow. The children who were located can potentially provide new leads. Digital devices can be examined. Warrants can be pursued. Adults connected to the cases can be interviewed. Custody records can be reviewed. And investigators can determine whether anyone committed crimes while those children were missing. Some cases may end with no criminal charges at all. Others may turn into much larger investigations. Officials have not publicly provided a case-by-case breakdown for all 163 children. And because minors are involved, many details may appropriately remain private. That means there is still a lot we do not know. We do not know how many children were found in each country. We do not know how long every child had been missing. We do not know how many cases involved suspected trafficking. And we do not yet know how many additional criminal investigations will result in charges. Those are important limitations. They also make this an ongoing story rather than a closed one. Now, the bigger lesson. There is a broader lesson behind Operation Statewide Shield. Missing child investigations have changed. A child can cross several counties in hours. A social media account can connect someone in Florida with another person thousands of miles away. A custody dispute can become an interstate or international investigation, and vulnerable teenagers can be approached by people they have never met in person. Law enforcement has had to adapt. The old model of one agency working one case inside one jurisdiction is often not enough. Operations like Dragon Eye, Home for the Holidays, and now Statewide Shield rely on networks. One agency may have the missing person report. Another may find the digital lead. Another may locate the child. Another may make the arrest. and child welfare specialists may decide what happens after the recovery. That is what makes this operation significant beyond the headline number. It demonstrates an increasingly coordinated model for dealing with missing and endangered children. And according to Florida officials, that model is not ending with this operation. Aj, what happens next? For the 163 children, the immediate search is over. But their individual stories are not. Some have reportedly returned to their families. Others have entered foster care or other placements. Some may continue receiving medical, social, or victim support services. And for investigators, several cases are moving in the opposite direction. Instead of closing, they are expanding. 3 arrests have been announced. Officials say more investigations have been launched, and more arrests are expected. That means Operation Statewide Shield could produce new developments long after the 5-day search itself ended. The next major questions are now clear. How many of these cases will lead to criminal charges? Will investigators identify additional adults accused of exploiting vulnerable children? And could Florida repeat the statewide model in the future? For now, one fact stands out. 163 missing children, ranging from an infant only months old to teenagers approaching adulthood, have been located or recovered. But the operation also revealed something else. Finding a missing child is not always the end of an investigation. Sometimes it is the moment the investigation truly begins.